Welcome to Tangent PropTech, where real estate meets innovation and goes a bit off script. I'm Edward Cohen, PropTech entrepreneur and your host. On this show, we bring on a guest who's shaping the future of real estate. We dive into housing innovation, climate tech, the future of work, and everything transforming our buildings and cities. And of course, we go on some tangents. If you work in real estate, PropTech, development, or if you're just obsessed with making buildings and cities better, this show is for you. Because sometimes the best real estate ideas start with a tangent. Today on Tangent, we have Owen Barrett, CEO of Shine. Maximize net operating income with multifamily solar solutions. Where does this podcast find you?
I'm calling in from Park City, Utah. Thanks for having me on.
The Silicon Slopes. How's the powder doing?
We're not having a great year of powder. It started off, December was pretty bad. We had a couple storms in January. Now it's looking pretty dry for the next 10 days. And then it seems like storm cycles may change late January. So fingers crossed, it's just going to be kind of a late start.
Some parts of the country are dreading storms and other parts of the country are hoping for storms. So I hope for a stormful winter for you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Let's jump right into it. Owen, you started as a finance guy and then went back to school for environmental science, exited your first clean energy venture, and then decided to tackle tenant meters. Just walk us through how you got to being part of Shine and tackling electricity for multifamily.
Yeah, I mean, in school, I loved financial analysis. So that led me to a career in finance. Loved work in Excel, loved the analysis, hated the finance industry. So I decided, or I thought, if I took this financial acumen and I went to school for environmental science, that it would somehow lead to a career where I was using financial analysis for something I just felt more passionate about. This was in 2012. The sustainability movement was super new. There was a LEED. That was the only building rating system at the time. But fortunately, it all worked out. I ended up with a degree in environmental science and management. I got a job as an energy manager for a Fortune 100 company in San Diego. Got 3 years of experience doing any kind of clean tech project that made financial sense. So fuel cells, storage, solar, LED lights, HVAC optimization, and then just found myself kind of bored. I've always wanted to go down the entrepreneurial journey. On a whim, I quit my cushy corporate job. I started a lighting company called Lumio. We did $0 of revenue for 18 months. I was basically broke. I thought I was going to have to move back home. And then everything changed. Got our first customer, ended up doing, I think, 9 figures in revenue in the next 18 months, sold the company, started investing passively as an LP into multifamily syndications, realized how far behind the industry was when it came to energy management, onsite renewables, energy efficiency, kind of you name it. So starting in 2018, I went down this path of how to decarbonize multifamily, and I've been doing that ever since.
Kudos for you for sticking to your guts and to your talents and what you enjoy doing in finance and not letting certain industry dynamics or cultures discourage you. I think that shows that your skills can be still useful even though the stereotype of an industry may not be the best fit. It reminds me of my sister, actually, who's a finance girl. Similar situation with her feelings about the finance industry, but then she finds her footing in doing finance for companies that she's passionate about or in spaces that she's passionate about.
That's the number one professional advice that I think you can give young people, right? Is you don't need to love your first job, but you need to learn a skill. And then you can take that skill to any industry that you want to, or just something that you're more passionate about. But it's so critical to develop skills early on.
Absolutely. So what's going on? Give us first the overview on where are we in terms of multifamily in the US? What is powering these buildings? Why is solar more affordable, more better environmentally friendly option than fossil fuels or than how we've traditionally built out solar for multifamily?
Yeah, so I think at large, across the board, most multifamily properties are a combination of gas and electric. That's how they're being powered. Usually heating is gas, everything else is electric. Occasionally, some newer developments will be all electric, but I would say that's kind of a newer phenomenon. The other interesting thing that we've discovered, which is not really going to be new to the multifamily industry, but the vast majority of properties are individually metered electrically, meaning that each tenant has their own utility meter. That is problematic from a solar perspective because in every state except for three, those three being California, Colorado, Massachusetts, if you want to install solar beyond the common area meters, you have to install one small solar system per apartment unit.
Wow.
Which is complicated from the installation perspective. It's expensive. It's the real challenge though is post-installation, on a 200 unit building with 200 small solar systems. How do you build 200 tenants? How do you monitor 200 systems? It's a mess. And so we had to come up with a proprietary software platform to solve that because we knew how to do the installation, but we didn't know how to do all the, what I'll call kind of administrative tasks post-installation.
Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with certain regulations that I know new developments in New York City, for example, must be all electric soon enough. And the last thing I heard is even though technically you could still build gas power buildings right now, they're not really giving out the gas. The utility companies aren't putting it out anymore to discourage this type of energy type of buildings. So what exactly is Shine doing? Is Shine solving the problem of the individual meters? And why even going through this hassle? Because the way you're describing it for multifamily owners and operators, they have enough to worry about. So why even go through the quote unquote hassle of individually installing and measuring what each unit is consuming to get solar onto their properties?
The multifamily and the solar industry have had a hard time sort of dating each other for a long time. The solar industry traditionally does not understand multifamily. They don't get the nuances of the industry. They don't understand like what drives project level returns. Since solar has been like a technology, solar companies have been pitching multifamily owners, let's put solar on your common area meter. You're paying for lights on your leasing center and your fitness center and your pool. Let's install solar to eliminate that or decrease that load. And it seems like a good pitch from the solar company's perspective, but what they don't understand is that they're pitching, a $300,000 system to a $50 million property. And that asset manager does not care about the $300,000 solar system and the $40,000 in NOI that it generates. Mm-hmm. So the solar companies, the solar industry has just been ineffective at pitching multifamily. Conversely, you now have the multifamily industry, which a lot of them are, especially the institutional groups, are pressured to do ESG reporting. And it's easier to install solar on common area meters. But from an emissions perspective, only 5% of total electric consumption comes from common area meters. The 95% comes from tenant meters. Our argument is that if you're a multifamily owner and you're talking about decarbonizing your portfolio via common area meters, you're really doing more greenwashing than decarbonization, because it's a drop in the bucket. And so we thought through this whole problem, which in the industry is known as the split incentive problem. How do you get owners to pay for solar on tenant meters when tenants benefit from the electricity generated? That's been holding up the industry forever. And that's what our software helps solve, is it diverts the benefit back to the owners. So now they are incentivized to pay the $1 million or $2 million for solar in the first place because they're creating $600 per unit NOI. So we're doing the design, the installation, the billing, the maintenance, the monitoring. We're doing everything. We're 100% turnkey, and we think that's really critical to the multifamily space because solar is not anybody's priority in multifamily. It has to be done in an easy way for ownership or for asset management. Otherwise, it won't be done at all.
I think this holistic approach is very ambitious, but also I think you would give a lot of blue flame investors the comfort that you've really thought this through and you're not trying to give your clients more work to do, right? You're taking it from installation all the way to the reporting. I think that's super ambitious, especially for startups, but at the same time, I don't see another way. When multifamily owners and operators have so many other things to worry about, you're not looking to give them more work. You're looking to give them solutions. And in this case, you're giving them NOI. Let's talk about that NOI. Like how does it work in terms of generating those $600 per unit in NOI? Break that down for us. How does that work? How fast do you get there?
So on average, we are installing about a 2.5 kW system per apartment unit. And so across the US, that'll generate about 3,500 kilowatt hours per year. And using an average electricity rate of 16 cents, that's how we get to about $600 per unit in NOI.
Mm-hmm.
It does take about a year to get there, 6 months best case scenario from signing an agreement, because we need to design the system, we need to permit the system, we need to build the system. But we do everything in-house. We're vertically integrated. And so we think it's as simple as it could be. It's as little work for the on-site team as possible. There is some work required, but we really try and minimize it. And I think the interesting thing is, if you put a cap rate on that $600 per unit, what we see almost always is that the return on equity for what it costs to install solar is 2 to 3x what you get on exit. So this is not it's nice to be green message. This is here's a way to make more money. Here's a way to look at an underutilized roof and turn it into an NOI generating asset in a way that the industry really isn't doing right now.
The way I think about renewables, unfortunately, if we leave it up to the generosity and the good hearts of investors and players, it won't happen unless it pencils out, right? No one is doing this as a voluntary. Similar with like organic food or vegan food. They either have to do it cheaper or tastier. Otherwise,
I agree.
Otherwise, there's little to no incentive to switch.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of clean tech companies get wrong in the multifamily space and otherwise, is they think it's the right thing to do, and so it should happen, rather than coming at it from like a first principles finance and economics perspective and saying, look, irregardless of the environmental impact, this is just what you should be doing to make more money off your investments. And then it also has this environmental impact, which we can talk about in ESG reports, et cetera. But we're doing it because it makes investments better.
Absolutely. Okay, so do the buildings that are working with Shine that you're installing and providing solar energy to, do they have to be in sun-friendly states or locations?
It definitely helps. So on average, a kilowatt of solar produces about 1,400 kilowatt hours a year. That number is as high as 1,600 kilowatt hours a year in Texas and Arizona, and as low as 900 in, say, like coastal Washington. So solar costs the same amount to install, more or less, across the country. But if you're generating more units of electricity per unit of solar, then the economics are going to be better in states that have more sunny days per year.
Okay. I mean, the sunny states are the ones that are seeing more multifamily construction anyway.
Exactly.
So the Sun Belt, the name says it all. We've been talking about how you work with owners and operators, but really this type of projects involve all the players in the value chain, if you will, from the resident all the way to the utility companies, the regulators. So, how, utilities can be your friends, can be your enemies. They may move slower at times in the private sector. How are you handling everything? How do you get residents on board? How do you work with utility companies? Any stories from the trenches?
Yeah, I mean, I would say utilities are never our friend, right? We're pitching a business model that takes away revenue from them. We have not experienced a utility that's excited about what we're doing. I think some of them will talk about how they're excited about it. Oh, solar on low income's great, and have grant programs for it. But, actions speak louder than words. And when the interconnection process is unduly complicated or complex or takes too long, it's great that they may have a grant program set up, but ultimately they're making the installation process take longer. We always start with the owner. We pitch the owner first. It's a very simple conversation. Project's going to cost $1 million. It's going to generate $200,000 in NOI. Is that valuable to you? And if it is, then we'll usually engage asset management, property management, talk about what the process is going to be to onboard the tenants, because in most instances, we do need tenants to sign interconnection agreements. That generally cannot be forced upon them when they're like during their lease, but it can be forced upon them during move-in and renewal. There are net benefits to tenants. Tenants save money when they have on-site solar. There's a decent value pitch to them, but it still requires education. Unfortunately, the solar industry is kind of plagued by bad contractors and bad experiences. So I think everybody just knows someone that's had a bad experience with a solar installation, and tenants are no different. once we're engaged with the tenants and have property management, asset management on board, we'll start talking about to the utility about how to actually do the installation. And then once the system's online, the owner starts generating NOI and the tenants start generating savings. But it does usually take 6 to 12 months from signing an agreement to turning the system on.
Fascinating. How long do the solar panels last? Do they require any maintenance? Say $200,000 per year generated, so you get it back in 5 years and change, and then for the rest of that asset's life, you're generating that basically, or is there some maintenance or replacement required?
So I guess the big sort of dirty secret within the solar industry is the challenges with monitoring. So most times a system is underperforming. It's because nobody's monitoring the system. An inverter may be down and nobody is realizing that inverter's down. And so it'll be down for 3, 6, 12 months before somebody decides, we need to call the contractor and have them fix this. And then you're dealing with 3 to 6 months of time going by before the repairs are made. It's equipment downtime that's leading to a lot of underperformance. And most contractors don't want to talk about monitoring because it's a headache. So if you're a customer and you ask your contractor, what are you doing to monitor the system, or how is this system being monitored? Or if I'm a institutional owner with 100 properties in all different states and I want to install solar via different contractors, how am I going to monitor those 100 systems? And the industry does not have a good answer for that right now. We offer free monitoring. We're what I would say is a tech-forward solar installer. So we think it's critical for all of our customers, all of our systems to have a really easy monitoring interface. So the maintenance is fairly low if you're on top of monitoring. But if you just install the system and you expect it to operate as estimated, you will definitely run into problems. The useful life of solar panels is 25 years. The useful life of microinverters is 25 years. The useful life of string inverters is 10 years. So what your maintenance costs are going to be is heavily correlated to what you install in the first place. A lot of people that we talk to make the mistake of trying to install the cheapest system up front because they don't take into account what the maintenance costs are going to be on the back end. If you spend 10% more to install a system, you're probably going to have 100 times less maintenance issues over the next 25 years. But again, the industry is kind of plagued with bad contractors that don't tell the full picture. And then that leads to issues post-installation. So that's one of the things that we're trying to solve, is just being really transparent and honest about what it means to install different types of systems or different types of components.
This episode is brought to you in collaboration with CREtech, one of the most valuable events I attend each year. It's happening on October 20th and 21st at the Javits Center in New York City. Whether you're a real estate owner, developer, investor, occupier, or tech leader, this is where business gets done. I've had the chance to grow real partnerships and discover tech solutions here that I might not have come across otherwise. And this year, CREtech New York is back with CREtech Meetup, the one-on-one meetings program that will deliver 20,000 pre-scheduled meetings. Designed for qualified real estate professionals, the program covers your full event pass plus up to $800 in travel and hotel costs. All you need to do is choose one-on-one meetings with tech companies that match your business needs. It's a smart, low-pressure way to explore what's out there without the typical event costs. If your company owns or manages 1,000 plus residential units or 1 million square feet of commercial space, and you're involved in tech or operations decision-making, this is definitely worth checking out. Learn more in the show notes and see if you qualify by reaching out to us at community@tangentproptech.com. I'd love to hang out at the event as well, so feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Now, back to the show. So interesting. I mean, there's a big education gap here, and not because people aren't familiar, but because people are familiar with the wrong stuff, basically.
Yeah. And evaluating proposals on the wrong variables, right? Everyone wants to look at price, but they don't necessarily look at components. They don't look at warranties. They don't look at just the reputations of different manufacturers. Like an easy Google search will show you the quality of the components that you're planning on installing, but most people don't do that.
Oftentimes the hardest thing is not learning, but unlearning.
Yeah.
For those in the audience that aren't too familiar, can you explain what an inverter is?
Yeah, so in inverter, the energy is created on AC and it converts it to DC or inverts it to DC. I think the big difference for the audience to know is that there's really two types of inverters. There's string inverters and there's microinverters. String inverters are associated with 10 to 100 modules or panels. And so if that inverter goes down, those 100 panels go down, and now 100 panels are not producing. On the other side of the equation, you have microinverters, which is one inverter per module or panel. So if one inverter goes down, you just have one module that's not producing. And so we always specify microinverters. If groups tell us that they want string inverters, we'll try and talk them out of that because it's generally a poor decision. But we do install them from time to time. We just see a lot less maintenance issues on systems that have microinverters and string inverters.
How are you convincing asset managers, property managers that, they're dealing with insurance, rising property taxes, labor costs climbing, hard to find new labor. So how do you convince them that solar, is the thing that they should be prioritizing right now?
All those macro forces have made our job a lot easier, right? Insurance has doubled, if not more, over the last 2 to 4 years. Property taxes have doubled, if not more, over the last 2 to 4 years. Labor costs have gone up. Rent has stabilized. Interest rates are higher than they have been historically, even though they're kind of trending down, they're still high. So the value add playbook or the buy and hold playbook that has made institutional investors double-digit returns over the last, call it 20 years, is no more. And now asset owners, asset managers need to get a lot more creative about how are we creating value out of this community. And in almost every instance, the value stops at the roof line. Like people don't consider their roof as income generating. And that's the mind shift that we're trying to get the industry to grapple with, is the same way that you're evaluating a quartz countertop versus granite. And what is that going to result in a rent premium, or dog parks or playgrounds or covered parking, all these tried and true methodologies of these value creating opportunities. We're trying to get the multifamily industry to recognize the same opportunity exists on a roof. It can be a flat TPO roof. It could be a pitched shingle roof. It can either not create income or create income. And in today's environment, owners really need to get creative about how they're creating value, because it's just not as easy as it used to be.
Absolutely. When I first moved to New York, I used to see all those empty rooftops, and I was like, why aren't we doing something with them? Put up a 5-on-5 soccer court, or put up a vertical farming. I still think that's not the worst idea, but I think the best idea I've heard so far is solar, because it aligns incentives for everyone living, owning, or managing the property, and it helps the environment as a cherry on top, not as the necessary driver, but it good overall. So there's a lot of analysis paralysis as we've discussed, but you recently launched a new tool that helps solve that analysis paralysis. So tell us more about what this new tool does.
Yeah, we saw a big bottleneck in the industry, and that's a lot of groups that we work with are institutional, and they own 25 plus properties all across the US. And so they wanted to figure out, we have our portfolio, how do we prioritize the assets that we should be going after from a solar perspective? And if you start to try to engage contractors across the country to get pricing, you're going to drive yourself crazy quickly, because contractors don't get back to you. You're not going to have an apples to apples comparison of equipment from one property to another. And we wanted to build a tool that gets to like the 90th percentile of accuracy quickly. And so what we did is we built a really interesting sort of proprietary data set in terms of all of these solar layouts that we've done over the last 10 years. And so we have a really interesting data set that shows us basically square footage of roof, how that converts to kilowatts of solar for pitched roofs, for flat roofs. And it's pretty easy to use satellite imagery to measure square footage of roof. So we combined the area mapping tool with our proprietary data set, and we figured out that we could estimate really quickly, again, within the 90th percentile, how much solar you can install, what it will produce, and the production numbers are specific to geography. So if you have 100 kW in Washington compared to Texas, it's going to be different. And then what it's going to cost roughly to install. And we've just gotten such positive feedback from asset owners because they want to be able to do an initial first pass for a lot of their properties, whether it's existing or things that they're acquiring. And there just wasn't a very good free tool for anybody to use. And so we're seeing really strong traffic on our website with that tool.
Very cool. Again, you're thinking the right way in terms of let's not give our prospects and clients more work. Let's do the work for them.
Yeah.
I love that mentality. And who are ideal targets? Is it retrofitting existing multifamily buildings or new developments or both?
So in a world with the ITC, which is the world we're in for the investment tax credit, that's the world that we're in for the next 6 months. New construction and existing buildings are fair game. We're going to have to pivot our business model to almost exclusively new construction when the ITC goes away, until what I think is going to happen is electricity rates are rising so quickly across the country that in 18 to 24 months, we're not going to need that tax credit to make solar pencil on existing buildings. So I think we'll pivot to new construction for a little bit. And then once electricity rates climb as they've continued to do for the last couple of years, we'll pivot back to existing, because the opportunity with existing buildings is a lot larger than it is with new construction.
Especially in this country where we can't build fast enough. Unfortunately.
Exactly. Yeah. We have a lot of existing old buildings.
Mm-hmm. So you're growing fast, and you had explored in the past the venture capital route for your seed round. So what's your outlook currently on fundraising and staying founder led, or are you exploring the VC route?
We had a pretty bad experience with the VC community, I guess you could say. We connected with a lot of cleantech VCs. And what we heard far and large was they're really not interested unless it's a software only play. I think that's interesting because I think if you're honest with yourself, you come to the conclusion really quickly that software is not going to solve climate change. We need hardware deployed very quickly. And so we fortunately raised a seed round. We did not do it in the VC community. I don't know what the future holds, but I think the VC community in climate tech and kind of at large is going to have to get more creative than just invest in software, because I think AI is really disruptive to like the SaaS business model. So depending on how many contracts we get or how many projects we get under contract before the safe harbor deadline of July 4th, we may need to raise some more money just to support like the growth that we're seeing. But ideally, we don't. I mean, we've raised around. We don't want to do anything that's going to be dilutive. We don't want to give up any more control. We think we can just kind of grow organically from here, but we just have to wait and see.
One day at a time, but good to keep your options open. But at the same time, it seems like you're in a good position either way. I mean, you really live this stuff, and you live your passions. Park City trail runs, Nosara, surfing in Costa Rica, and you're building a remote team in Utah. So what advice would you give other founders and real estate investors and leaders that are building teams and companies remotely?
I'd say don't listen to anyone other than your customer. A lot of people want to give advice about what's going to work, what's not going to work. We're in a new time. Remote work has not been around for that long. We have done it successfully, not without its challenges. It is hard. You don't get that same kind of camaraderie that you get from seeing people in the office every day. So you have to kind of get creative about how do you solve for that. But a lot of people give us bad advice, and sometimes it's from really successful people. And so it's hard to turn that down. But at the end of the day, we listen to the input from our customers and potential customers the most. I mean, if we hear things sort of the same thing from a customer or a potential customer over and over, that's when we really start to pay attention to. That's sort of the things that we build towards. I think it's never been easier to build a remote team. I do think it comes with its challenges, but it also has a lot of flexibility. You can hire talented people from all over the country. If you're in an expensive market, like I was in San Diego for a long time, people are really expensive in San Diego. You can have a much smaller operating budget if you start to hire across the country and just kind of come to terms with what it means to have a remote team.
What works for a company or for a leader doesn't work for all of them. Last but not least, Owen, collaboration superpower. If you could choose one person, historic or living, to do a partnership with, who would it be?
I would pick Paul Sween, who was a former CEO of Dominium. Dominium over the last 5 years has either been the number one or the number two LIHTC developer in the country. We're seeing a tremendous growth in the LIHTC market because of the nuance between solar going into tenant meters, max rent, utility allowances, and what happens. Effectively, if you install solar and decrease utility allowances, you can increase net rent in a rent-restricted environment. And so we're seeing a lot of growth in the LIHTC space. Dominium's been a leader, for 20 plus years. And I think if we could get Dominium and Paul engaged in tenant solar systems, I think the rest of the industry would probably listen.
Well, Paul, if you're listening, reach out to Owen. You know what to do. Where can multifamily investors and operators and other Tangent listeners learn more about Shine and connect with you?
LinkedIn is really the only social platform that I'm on. So just Owen Barrett on LinkedIn. I'm pretty good at responding to messages. Not perfect, but I try. Yeah, always happy to connect with multifamily owners, with entrepreneurs. I mean, we're at the very beginning of what we think is a really long journey. So always happy to connect and collaborate.
Owen Barrett, CEO of Shine. Thank you so much for coming to Tangent today and sharing your background, your wisdom, and your exciting company with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Muchas gracias. And thank you for listening to this episode of Tangent PropTech. If you learned something new or enjoyed the conversation, text a friend the link to this episode right now. You can find links, resources, and ways to connect with us in the show notes, or reach out anytime at tangentcommunity@gmail.com or on LinkedIn. We love interview suggestions, topic ideas, or just a friendly hello. We'll catch you next time, and remember, the best PropTech ideas usually start with a tangent. If you're building something impactful in real estate or tech and want to reach our audience of decision makers, investors, and operators, email us tangentcommunity@gmail.com.